Welcome to the Mojo Mundi podcast, where it's all about magic, manifesting, and movement. I'm Ginny Watts, the Dancing Witch, and in this episode, I invite you to experience Beltane in Yellowstone, Moonrise, magic, and meaning. This year, I spent Beltane in Yellowstone National Park. At first blush, it seemed a coincidence that we ended up heading out to the park midday on April 30. We had originally wanted to ride our bikes around the west side of Yellowstone before the roads opened to cars, buses, and motorcycles, as well as the vast hordes of tourists that come with them. Upon investigating when the roads would be open for travel, we found that the park was set to open April 17, which was a couple days away. We were not going to make it to the park before that. As I looked at the calendar and realized that this year the full moon fell right on Beltane, I proposed we abandon the bikes and consider heading down for this auspicious day, if we could find lodging. Given what the opening of tourist season in the park usually looks like, this was a bold move, but my husband was confident that we'd be beating the influx of vacationers. While we justified our choice by pointing to the political instability in the U.S., the soaring oil prices, and the concomitant impact on foreign and domestic visitors, the truth is his intuition and ability to manifest space for us is legendary in our family, whether it's in the parking lot, the movie theater, or the great outdoors. So we went for it, and sure enough, we were able to snag a room in West Yellowstone at what looked like a decent establishment for a very reasonable price, for not one, but 2 nights, and the trip was on. One of the many things that I love about my life these days is that, more than ever before, I am immersed in spirituality. I have the time and space to focus attention on, to make choices from, to practice living each moment in connection with the divine, within and all around. This trip, the location, the timing, the intentions, was centered around and fueled by spirit. It was a gift that we missed the window to bike in the park. That potential disappointment became an invitation to something really magic. And because both my husband and I were able to stay curious, to sit with not knowing, to ask, what is the message? Where is the invitation? We opened to looking for another possibility. What we found was well beyond our original expectations. I was born in Billings, Montana, about 200 miles from Yellowstone National Park. Billings is right on the Yellowstone River, and Roundup, where I spent the first year of my life, is an hour to the north. My family moved to Bozeman, Montana when I was a year old, putting me less than 100 miles from the west entrance to the park. Bozeman is nestled in the Gallatin Valley, which is part of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. It is where I lived from age 1 to my 7th birthday, and to whither, after age 7, I, like the sandhill cranes, returned each summer until I was able to move back permanently. In short, Yellowstone is in my blood, my heart, and my soul. For me, a trip to Yellowstone Park is a pilgrimage of sorts, a pilgrimage that I have made every year of my life. My father claimed to be an atheist, but I actually think he was just mad at God. My parents gave up going to church when we moved to Bozeman. They both loved camping, and my dad had a reverence for nature. He was deeply moved by the history of indigenous people in North America and by their spiritual practices and their deep connection with the natural world. By simply being with him as we hiked and camped, while he fished and split wood and built each evening's fire, I came to see the power and beauty of nature, the mystery and majesty of the world left to be wild. I began to feel the energy of soil, duff, plants, trees, animals, fish, of stones and mountains, of seeps and rivers. Long before I understood that God was all around, that Goddess was everything, I began to experience a change in my energy, my mood, in the sensorial interface between me and the world when I was in the woods. And it became more apparent with each year that my visceral and energetic connection with nature was most powerful in Yellowstone. By birth, by nature, and by nurture, I was destined to practice nature-based spirituality. And of course, Yellowstone Park is my tirtha, my kshetra. According to Axel Michaels, tirtha, a Sanskrit word and powerful concept in Hinduism, refers to a place of pilgrimage that is a sacrosanct junction between, quote, worlds that touch and do not touch each other. Tirtha is often associated with a body of water. Wajarshinandi describes a kshetra as a, quote, geographical area where a deity decides to interact or reside. Kshetra appears in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. I think most visitors to Yellowstone are awed by the grandeur of the countryside, the power of the geysers and waterfalls. I know that people are delighted to see the vibrant colors painted by minerals and microscopic cyanobacteria in hot springs and mud pots. And tourists are mesmerized by the plethora of wild denizens of the forest and grasslands in the park. For me, there is a deeper experience. The breathtaking physical manifestations that constitute Yellowstone vibrate with divine presence. The environment presents unavoidable invitations to connect instinctively with the elemental energies of fire, earth, water, and air. If you want to experience somatic spirituality, I can't imagine a better place. If you wish for a call to reverence that is sensible, that is available through the body, you need look no further. It is an unmistakable intersection of the manifested and the divine, a region where Creator is blatantly present and interactive. Yellowstone is Tirtha and Kshetra. By going to the park on a Beltane full moon, we added to Yellowstone's sacred heart and elemental energies the celestial energies of sun and moon. Beltane is the first day of May, an important Celtic sacred day lying roughly midway between spring equinox and summer solstice. It is a solar Sabbath that focuses on our physical relationship with the sun at this time of year. Full moon is a powerful time associated with completion, gratitude, high energy, and clarity. My husband and I set our intention for our visit to Yellowstone not so much by words as by our actions. We didn't say out loud what we were specifically seeking. The prayer was in choices we made in location, in timing, in flowing with the inspired unfolding. Based on many years living our spiritual paths, we both just know that aligning with sacred nature is itself a transmission to deity, one that leaves open to deity how the interaction will unfold. It was, of course, better than we could have imagined. We spent 3 days and 2 nights in this divine, energetic tapestry. Our time was a delightful, fun, awe-inspiring, satisfying flow of experience. To share all the synchronicities, communications, inspirations, and gifts we received would not only be too much for this podcast, it would also draw energy away from the experience. I would like to share 2 events that are beautiful examples of co-creating and experiential dialogue with the divine. As we drove along the Gallatin River on our way to West Yellowstone, I felt delighted with the clear sunshine streaming in the windows, with the enduring landmarks punctuating our progress, with the river flowing north in counterpoint to our journey southward. I felt pleased with getting a hotel room for 2 nights at a sweet price. Of course, the rooms with the fridge and microwave were all taken by the time we made our reservation. And a nice bed in a cozy room under a roof with a private bath was a score for this time of year. Still, I found myself blurting out, "It would be pretty cool if we arrived at the hotel to find that the staff had boffed our reservation and as an apology they upgraded our room." My husband agreed. I had a clear feeling. No more thoughts, just a feeling of enjoying the unexpected upgrade. And then I was back to all the beauty of the canyon and the pleasure of our meandering conversation. This is a new experience for me. To clarify, what happened when I spontaneously spoke my desire for an upgrade is this. I felt some contrast about having to accept a standard room. For health reasons, I need to bring my own food. It's kind of a pain, and I'm used to it. As a result, I also need to have a way to store and prepare my food, hence the desire for a fridge and microwave. It isn't a big deal, and it does mean more schlepping in the form of a cooler and a microwave, and more shuffling of items to and from the car. The contrast invited an awareness of what I would prefer instead of what I was handed. While my co-creating is always evolving and expanding, my powerful brain still regularly kicks in before my new habits have a chance to roll out. I tend to feel the contrast, bemoan it a bit, or more than a bit, and then feel what I would prefer. It used to be all thinking, so going directly to what feels better is powerful expansion for me. In the past, I would have thought about how that would look in the hopes of eliciting the feelings necessary to align with attracting the outcome. Now, I don't spend much time in the picturing. It tends to elicit a lot of worry about the details. That releasing of the picturing is another evolution in my process. Where I continue to get stuck in my head is in believing it is mine. My stepping stone to "it is already done" is to say those words. In other words, think them. I almost always follow this declaration with a quiet investigation. Do I really believe that? Very distracting and completely pulls me off course. I then have this complex dance getting back to the feeling of the manifestation completed. I can do it, and it's practicing a lot of ambivalent vibration. But my impromptu declaration of getting a room upgrade was different. There was very little thinking involved. I had a brief and mildly emotional recognition of having a situation that required less ease and more effort than I would prefer, that is, schlepping, cooler, and microwave, and then that thought was done and gone. The next thought was not how do I solve this problem or talking myself into a more positive view of the situation. It was the picture, fully formed, of what I would prefer, a room upgrade, accompanied by a strong sensation of how it would feel when that non-existent situation suddenly arrived. My utterance did include a how. The staff makes a mistake and upgrades us as an apology, which is an efforting toward making the co-creation happen that isn't necessary or helpful. But this time it was a random thought, only tangential to the clearly formed desire. In the past, I would have spent a lot of my time on the how of the manifestation and very little on the sensations of receiving. This time, I had a burst of immersion in the pleasure of the upgrade, and then that thought was superseded by other thoughts completely unrelated. The sensation, however, of surprise, delight, of receiving the gift, of manifesting, of co-creating, flooded me and remained all the way to west. I was full of gratitude and elation without spending one more thought. We arrived in West Yellowstone and found our way to our hotel. It was in the older part of West, and as Siri directed us to the parking at the front of the hotel, I couldn't believe where I was. The Stagecoach Inn. No way! The name hadn't even registered when we were booking our reservation. As a little girl, well, even as a teen, I always wanted to stay here. The inn was built in 1948, built in the Tudor Revival architectural style. In other words, it looks like an English manor house, or at least a 1940s American Western version of an English manor house. It always reminded me of the Disney classic Snow White. The steep pitch of the roof and the dormer windows enchanted me. I was so surprised and delighted. My husband was delighted that I was delighted. We checked in and walked up the literal rustic grand staircase to the second floor and into our room. It was a dormer room, snug with a view to the south. And it had a fridge and a microwave. We paid for a standard room and we got the upgrade. No effort, no drama, just lovingly revealed to us a manifestation that was born of inspired unfolding. There is the sweet gift of co-creation. When I co-create something with deity, through releasing the details and allowing the inspired unfolding, it is always something better. And there is always a twist, a little personal detail that lets me know, this is from us to you. When we made our reservation, we didn't see a picture of the hotel. We picked based on price and availability. When we arrived, it was the desired upgrade wrapped in a long-lost dream come true. Our very first experience of the sacred weekend was this magical co-creation. The best part is that this process is dialogue with deity, communal exchange with the divine. Our plan for May Day was to spend the whole day enjoying the Upper Geyser Basin, home of Old Faithful, considered the most famous geyser in the world. There are many other geysers in the basin, over 150 of them in a single square mile, each with its own spirit. Woods surround the basin, and the elegant Old Faithful Inn forms a striking yet humble counterpoint to the dramatic center platform of the geyser field. Our day was filled with multiple co-creations, synchronicities, conversations with the sacred. At the end of the day, we headed to our next divine encounter. We left the upper basin around 8 p.m. and headed toward the Fountain Flats Drive. This short drive leaves the Grand Loop Road just south of the junction of Nez Perce Creek and the Firehole River. The paved, two-lane, two-way drive is laid on the roadbed of the old wagon road, known as the Old Freight Road, that serviced the park until the turn of the century. The drive immediately crosses Nez Perce Creek and follows the Firehole River for a mile south-southwest to a parking lot. The pavement ends at the parking lot, and the drive becomes a wide gravel trail for hiking and biking, proceeding 4 miles to its far end near the Midway Geyser Basin. Fountain Flats is a broad valley floor of riparian meadow and grassland intermixed with geothermal sites that extends southeast from the drive to the foot of the lower geyser basin. Its sweeping expanse is punctuated by thermal cracks spewing steam and sometimes thermal springs, turning the grassland into wetland. Sedges and rushes, panic grass, bent grass, and pine grass form a lush blanket of knee-high forage for bison and elk herds, and cover for coyote, rodents, and birds great and small. Toward the northwest end of the valley, where the Fountain Flats Drive follows the banks of the Firehole, low hills ripple the land. We drove to a turnout on the drive just short of the parking lot at the end of the road. We angled our van so the windshield faced southeast. We got out and walked to the edge of the pavement behind the van where the grass sloped down to the riverbank. Across the Firehole, at the base of the hills that form the north boundary of Fountain Flats, was a herd of 80 bison. The herd spread across the foot of the hills and up the hillside, while downriver, 20 or so more bison gathered on our side of the Firehole. The entire bison assembly spanned the 3/4 of a mile to the main Grand Loop Road. Closer to us, Canada geese and wood ducks floated on the river or grazed in the grass. Occasionally, 1 or 2 ducks or geese would launch into the air while the birds on the ground would honk and quack in response. The light was dimming as the sun dipped below the hills behind us, and my husband remarked this was a good time to see coyotes. Directly in front of us was a long knoll covered at the ridge by scrubby conifers. As I gazed southeast toward the far mountains, a movement at the crest of the knoll caught my peripheral vision. Something light and compact was dropping off the top of the knoll and heading toward us. I grabbed the binoculars and focused on what turned out to be a coyote, still wearing its winter coat. My husband snagged the second pair of binoculars, and we watched the meandering progress of the coyote as it followed its ears and nose down the slope toward the drive. It turned to go north toward the main road, moving away from us. At that moment, a car exited the parking lot just past our turnout at the end of the road and made its way past us. The car slowed to a stop as the driver and passenger spotted the coyote. The coyote had been heading in the same direction as this passing car, but when they stopped, so did the coyote. It watched the car for a moment or two and then shifted back toward us and slowly meandered away from the other vehicle. The car drove on, and now the coyote was making a beeline for our vehicle. At this point, I had decided the coyote was male, not because of any woodcraft or natural lore, more by its movements and demeanor. The coyote stopped several times as he approached the road and stared right at us. He, as I was now thinking of him, angled toward us and walked halfway across the road and fixed us with an unabashed stare. He then turned his tail to us, squatted, and defecated in the middle of the road. If you aren't familiar with coyotes, this is an important way for them to mark their territory. I got the clear sense this communication had a twofold message. This is my turf, and I am in charge here. With that, he disappeared into the bushes between us and the river. Time passed. 2 more cars, the last in the parking lot, headed out to the main road. Unexpectedly, I again caught movement in my peripheral vision, this time up the road just short of the parking lot and trailhead. It was the coyote crossing the road back toward the knoll. The area he now entered sloped up to another higher knoll that ran almost perpendicular to the knoll directly in front of us. Interspersed among the green of lodgepole and limber pines were 2 to 3 times as many bleached white skeletons, trees that were left standing and dead after the major fires of 1988 that eventually toppled in the face of wind and snow. The coyote, trotting along the edge of the deadfall, stopped abruptly, and his great pointed ears focused intently on the trees that climbed away from him a short way up the side of the knoll. He began to carefully pick his way around the toppled trees, moving furtively and stopping often to listen, look, and smell. The northern coyote weighs 25 to 35 pounds and is around 2 feet tall. Its face looks more like a fox, while its body and movements are more like a wolf's. The coyote carries its tail straight down against the back of its hind legs, while the wolf carries its tail straight out in line with its spine. Our coyote friend used his long, narrow muzzle to differentiate the important scents from the myriad of plant, animal, insect, and mineral smells wafting toward him on the rising breeze. His coyote ears, larger and more pointed than other wild canines' ears, sorted out each rustle, each snap, each pop, till he found what he was searching for. As I watched, the coyote wound his way through the labyrinth of fallen timber, disappearing for a while behind trees and bushes. All at once he appeared at the far end of the patch of vegetation, and he wasn't alone. I had my binoculars trained on the coyote when I saw movement at the edge of the lens. It was a sandhill crane. I had no idea of the saga that was about to unfold. As I watched, the sandhill leapt into the air and flapped its wings feebly, flying low to the ground, maybe 15 feet ahead of the coyote. Then it began to walk briskly away from the coyote, striding on its long, spindly legs. The coyote took up a slow trot in pursuit. The crane stayed just ahead of the coyote, regularly looking over its shoulder to mark its pursuer's progress. As I swung my binoculars from the crane back toward the coyote, I saw a second sandhill, walking in the same direction as the hunter and the hunted. At about the same time, the coyote noticed the second crane and stopped, looking back and forth between the two birds, assessing his options. I now knew the first crane was a male and the trailing crane a female. She was definitely moving more slowly than her mate. I swung my focus to the male sandhill in time to see him hop awkwardly and take a short, low flight back toward the coyote, landing surprisingly close to it. That decided it. The coyote resumed his steady trot toward the male, who immediately turned away and resumed his striding walk, periodically marking the proximity of the coyote with a quick backward glance. But the female was undeterred, and she too maintained her pursuit of both coyote and mate. As abruptly as it began, the drama precipitously ended. The coyote, perhaps realizing he'd been had, turned up toward the top of the knoll where he had first appeared and disappeared into the dusk beneath the stand of trees that crowned the ridge. The male sandhill made an immediate about-face and gracefully rose into the air, gliding back toward his mate. When he landed a few feet in front of her, he leapt and bounded in an abbreviated version of his mating dance as she continued moving toward him. He strode to her and past her, and she turned to follow him back the way they had come. I watched them as they made their way to the top of the knoll that sat perpendicular to the road. She didn't move as quickly as he did, and he regularly slowed and waited for her to catch up. As they reached the top of the knoll, they both took to the air and glided out of sight on the far side. After a half hour, Venus was gloriously unmistakable in the ever-darkening western sky. I was still contemplating our numinous encounter with wild wisdom. I am, even in this moment, considering all this medicine story offers. That May Day evening, I found myself asking, who is the hero or even the protagonist in this ecological parable? The cranes were likely not nesting yet, no tiny innocents were at stake for now, and yet knowing that sandhill cranes are monogamous and mate for life, watching the male courageously lead a killer away from his less agile female partner, witnessing him choosing to stay so close to a lissom predator that can leap 12 to 14 feet horizontally to attack prey, and finally seeing his joyous dance as he greeted his anxious partner, and her pursuit, her willingness to put herself in harm's way in order to follow her mate, perhaps to defend him, if necessary, it was difficult not to rejoice as they flew off into the darkening sky together. And yet, the intrepid hunter is likely already supporting a den of pups and a mate. In fact, the coyote is also monogamous and often mates for life. He was hunting late into the evening. It is possible that he traveled 10 miles or more in his efforts to feed his family. Is that not noble, worthy of honoring? We are often cautioned not to anthropomorphize animals. I can tell you that the energy, the vibrations that emanated from those wild creatures was clear: disdain, determination, fear, worry, resignation, relief, and joy, all clearly present in their nonverbal communications. We humans want to be something other than animal. We want to be superior, separate. We want to be the sole possessors of soul. We, however, are animals, and all things have soul and sentience. If I took nothing else from this earthwise teaching tale, I know I was being called to venerate all sentient beings, to embrace them as manifested expressions of Creator, just as you and I are, and to protect them as the family they are. Finally, the moment we had been awaiting arrived. At the edge of the distant mountain ridge to the southeast, a vibrant, cream-colored glow appeared, intensifying with each passing moment until the rim of the Beltane full moon appeared. With swift grace, her glorious smiling face rose into full view. I stepped into the chilly night and drank in the moonlight, and felt complete. Fire, earth, water, air, sun, and moon. We are filled and surrounded with these elemental and celestial energies. Each day the gifts and messages from deity flow to us, often in seemingly mundane or insignificant form. If we choose to be present, every day is magic. With deep gratitude, my husband and I turned toward West Yellowstone and our cozy dormer room. I invite you to step into nature, wherever you may find it, and look for the divine in each flower, each insect, each stone and stream. With practice, the vibrations of the natural become perceptible. If you would like to deepen your somatic spiritual practice, I am holding a dedicated space just for you to find your unique ways of embodying your experience of Creator. Connect with me to ignite your inner wisdom and light the way forward on your living path. You can reach me via my website or email, or on Facebook or Instagram at Caravan of Dreams MT. Our music is used by permission of the artist, Sean Phoenix. Thank you, Sean. And thank you to Bozeman Public Library for the Workbench Sound Studio located in beautiful downtown Bozeman, Montana. If you would like to learn more about allowing and how to find your unique style of manifesting, please visit my website, caravanofdreamsmt.com, or email me at dancingwitchmt@gmail.com. This is Ginny Watts, the Dancing Witch. Till next time, blessed be.